oftentimes I'm surprised by how far I go back when I introduce myself to an investor, for example. I go back to like kindergarten and I let them know, I grew up in New York City, K through 12. I went to New York City public schools in Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan. Got to move around quite a lot because my dad is a Methodist minister. So he would be assigned to different churches. And so I think that's part of my upbringing, right? That I was always having to adapt to new environments. I didn't move city to city, but still New York City is, Queens is very different from Brooklyn. I remember, being scared, like, oh no, Brooklyn is where they have guns, right? When I was moving there from 5th grade to 6th grade. So, and then of course in my particular journey in high school, I went to a specialized high school from 7 to 12, and it was from 97 to 2003. So I was in Manhattan at the time of the tech bubble bursting in the late 90s. I was in Manhattan at the time when the Twin Towers came down, right? So there was a lot of these big upheavals that I experienced really right there, in Manhattan. And I was a public school kid, so that meant I was taking the subway home every day, ever since I was 12 years old. So, I think that kind of upbringing made me super gritty and very much expecting, the unexpected to happen at all times, right? You can't, there's no, you have an idea of where you want to go. You have an idea, you have some ideas, and you have some inklings of your interests, but it was sort of trying to always be very open-minded to what may come. And for certain, I was not thinking that one day I'm going to be digitizing the bus industry. That was very, very far from my mindset when I was in high school. So that's my early days of who I am, and now I'm here as an entrepreneur in Buffalo.
Imagine that, and a 43North winner. So for anyone that is going to watch this that was at Shays or has been to Shays, Siheun and her company Rally are one of our winners that presented and then moved to Buffalo. Siheun, let's go back though to high school. So tell us, you just mentioned you were in Manhattan, but tell us the name of the school, and if you can, go back and think through like what a normal day looked like for you in high school. Were you, both obviously in the classroom, but also clubs or any, non-classroom activities would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, so the school that I went to is called Hunter College High School, and it is a 5-borough school, even though it's in the Upper East Side. And you take a test in the 6th grade for a spot. So there are 250 spots, and you start with 250 kids, and you end up with 180 because that's the only entry point. So we become very, very small and very tight as we graduate. And it is a high pressure school in that of the 180 students, 60 do go to Ivy League. I was able to get to Columbia, and so it was very much the norm to, if 60 kids go to Ivy League, it was a very high pressure situation. And so, but the thing is, when you're in that situation as a kid, you don't know. You actually think this is the norm. It's like kids are so resilient, high school students are so resilient that you say this is what you're supposed to do, and I'm going to do it. So I found myself, I look back and I joke a lot, like I peaked at 17. That's when I was the most productive in my life because I had been gearing up towards, just juggling, keeping a lot of balls up in the air. So some of the activities that I was very much involved in was music. So my mother's a musician, and she was my first piano teacher. So I grew up playing piano. And in high school, I switched over to organ, the pipe organ. And I auditioned to get into Juilliard Pre-College, which is a Saturday pre-college conservatory, which is for all kinds of classical musicians. And I was able to be a part of that program, which very much defined my after-school curriculum. I had to practice every day after school, and I took the bus, to New Jersey to see my organ teacher, and then I would take the bus back to Port Authority, and then the subway all the way back to Brooklyn, which is about like 2 hours plus journey on my own when I was in high school. So I would do that once a week, go to Juilliard. So it was definitely, I could not imagine telling a high school kid doing that now. It's like when I was your age, I had to do that.
Right.
But for certain, you know, when I was 12 years old, I was taking the subway by myself from Brooklyn to Manhattan. Again, I don't think that would be allowed in parenting, but actually Hunter still is a 7 to 12 school, all borough school. So that is very much the norm. So I think I think kids can do a lot more than we let them, we believe them to be. They're certainly not children, they're mini adults, and music was a big part of it. In my school, within the school, I did musical theater. Not that I'm an actress at all, but it was a student production. And so I was the musical instructor. So I would play the piano, teach the choral parts, and this was all student run productions. So that was very much part of my high school identity as well. But the other things that I loved doing was Model UN. I'm really bad at public speaking. I have really terrible, scary memories of Model UN, of being asked a question about my country with South Africa. And they asked me a question and I had stage fright. I totally went blank. I was like, could you please ask me the question again, please? And she asked me again and I was like, I can't hear anything. It's like white noise. And I was up there in front of, all of my peers we were all kind of auditioning for a spot in Model UN. And I was up there and the teacher saw that I was having trouble and she just was like, oh, no worries, you got this, Siheun, don't worry, get off at the stage. Somehow I still made a spot on the team, which was, I couldn't believe it. But it was great that, it's still with me this day that I, that there is a possibility of the stage fright coming through. But Model UN was how I pushed myself to try to really always be talking more. I think, as an Asian woman, you're taught children don't speak, women don't speak, we're quiet. But that's not how, that's not how modern society is, or I don't believe that's how we should be. And so even if nobody was saying that explicitly, that is the understanding. And so, that kind of, context was very hard for me to unwind and be more active and be more vocal in school. So I would deliberately lean into things like that where I wasn't very so good at it, to try to just make sure that, I was well-rounded in that way. But I would probably say those were the biggest activities that, dominated, especially my junior year, senior year of college, of high school.
That's really brave of you to challenge yourself like that. That's
totally not sporty. Let me just add that part.
But Siheun, did you have any sense or interest, I should say, in being an entrepreneur? Were you aware of the viability of a career in entrepreneurship in high school?
I don't think that was a thing, back in like 2000, 2003, right? Like that, there was a path to starting a company that's leveraging technology to, make an impact on the world. I think that was still very far from, I think everyone was still very traumatized, maybe from the tech bubble bursting in New York in the late 90s. So that was certainly far from our imagination. But growing up in the church meant that I was always around small business people because it's a Korean church. Korean churches serve the Korean immigrant population, and they're running, New York City's laundromats and grocery stores and nail salons. And those are small business owners that were very much proud of what they had built, and that I got definitely of that front row experience of what it meant to have your own business. And I would say that there's something about being a minister that's very entrepreneurial. You're taking care of a community, you're fundraising, you're making sure your donors are happy. You're putting together programming, you're trying to grow your community. So, there is something very entrepreneurial about running a church and making sure that you can make ends meet for the church. So that was, that my parents' mindset when we immigrated here when I was 4 years old. And I would definitely attribute that sort of, fearlessness of like starting my own thing to that mindset that my parents had. I was definitely the kid who, sold, toys to my friends. I remember that, like in elementary school, I would buy, it's a Korean version of Jacks. It's like little little balls that you throw in the air that are like jacks, but it's a Korean game I gotta show you sometime. And they're pretty, they're sparkly, they're neon colors, they're glittery, and they're just little pretty beads. And I started a fad in my 5th grade class where I was like selling these like glittery balls to all my friends, and my parents were
I love
like,
it.
you should sell it with markup, right? You understand you're supposed to do that, right? I'm like, oh, okay.
All right.
So I think that's the first time I thought about, buying something and selling it at a profit.
It's great. I love it. I mean,
It's like the lemonade stand, right?
yeah.
Cool. Julie, did you have anything?
Yeah, I guess I guess we can move past high school in a little bit, but is there anything, I guess, if you could talk to like your high school self now, we want to really try and like reach our students too, what would you tell yourself? Like if you could look back at that kid in musical theater and UN, and what would you tell yourself now if you could?
I saw that question and I really struggled with it because I was, I was very privileged to have that upbringing of, that tightness of a close-knit school. Because when I went to Columbia, I really didn't have that. I had a really hard time finding my people at Columbia, which I'll explain later when we get to the college part. But so I don't have many college friends. I have high school friends, right? So I think, and I look at my college friends and they're like, I don't keep in touch with my high school friends at all, right? They're like,
yeah,
it's all about my college friends. And so, I think that, given that experience, I would just say that for others as well, like, I think there's something there to hold on to, with your high school friends. Like, these are your friends for life. And even if you, go apart, you'll always have each other. Like, we're of course definitely spread out all over the world now. But it just feels like family when you talk to them. So I would say that just, hold your friends close and support them. They're going to be with you for life.
Yeah, I agree. My high school friends are still my closest,
Cool.
Same.
Cool.
Well, yeah, let's
go ahead.
Yeah,
I was going to say, let's get into college. Like, how did you end up choosing, it seems like that was the path in your high school that a lot of people chose, the Ivy League schools like you were talking about, but why did you choose like Columbia? How did you end up there?
One thing that I do regret was that I was such a good girl, right? I listened to my guidance counselors. They said to me that you're to all the students, this is a very competitive pool of students. You can't all apply to Harvard. You can't all apply to whatever. That's going to ruin everyone's chances. So try to be like reasonable and apply to 2 Ivies, 2 very good schools, non-Ivies, and 2 safeties, right? And I actually followed that formula. So where I was like, you know what? It would have been cool if I had like done all 6 Ivy League schools, right? Like, I think about it, I'm like, I'm sure my friends did that. Like, I actually listened to the guidance counselor, right? So that, that's a kind of an interesting thing. Like, I wish that because my parents didn't go to college here in the States, they don't know the system. They don't know how to advise me. So, I just really had to listen to adults at guidance counselor. I absolutely believe they were the best. They had our best intentions at heart. But at the same time, I wish that I had reached out for other support, just to give you a little bit more guidance on the, college essay writing process, just to have more editors and to have more people who are at other schools, friends who are older at colleges. I wish I interviewed them more and took their advice more. So that I actually got a little bit distracted by the question, but I'm remembering something else. But I think there's more to the question.
Just how, we figured out how you selected that school. Like, what major did you end up picking, and just your transition, I guess, from high school to college?
Yeah. So Columbia, again, was just, it was a choice that was the obvious one because it's in New York City, and my parents needed to have me close, right? They're like, we can't afford to have you really far away. So I had to apply to Columbia and NYU. I wanted to apply to Stanford, but I did not because they're like, we can't afford this kind of long distance relationship with you, right? We can't be flying you and us back and forth. So, let's be reasonable here. So Columbia was like a reasonable choice, and I was really excited to get in. And one of the really important advice that I remember getting into Columbia from an older friend of mine, she said, you're getting into a good school, like just follow your passion there. Don't try to be so rational in terms of like, you must study econ or poli-sci for this path, like don't be so, rationally minded in terms of your major. Follow your passion in terms of like discovering what are you really good at? What are you, what brings you joy, right? So I was able to really think about that advice as I was narrowing down on my major, which I had to, of course, decide by my sophomore year. And by that time, I landed on this degree called, or the major called Comparative Literature and Society at Columbia, which requires you to study 2 foreign languages at an advanced level and then do some comparative work between 2 different cultures. So I had studied French all of high school. I would tell my former self, don't study French. So, obviously study Spanish to be helpful in the US. But so I studied French and then I switched to Spanish in college because I want to speak to Spanish speaking people in the US. And that was a practical thing. And then as my second foreign language, Columbia offered Korean. And I speak Korean with my family, but I really wanted to be better at it. And so those were the 2 foreign languages that I worked on. And then, of course, junior year, study abroad. That is, I completely, recommend it for everybody. There is a scholarship that the State Department gives to families of low-income families. And I got the scholarship called the Gilman Scholarship. And that allowed me, that really helped me be abroad. And I remember thinking, speaking to my Spanish teacher at Columbia, asking her, where should I go abroad? And I'm a New Yorker, so I got to go somewhere where I can get on public transit and be independent. And she said, and I said, I can't go to Europe. It's too expensive. I can't afford Europe. So where should I go in, Central or South America? And she said, Mexico City or Buenos Aires. Those are the 2 cities for you as a New Yorker. And so Mexico City felt too close. So I had to go to Buenos Aires, which is like an 11-hour flight away. And so I finally got away. And I lived in Buenos Aires for 12 months. And that was probably the best decision of my life, going there. So that would help me finish my degree. And I continued to do some music when I was at Columbia, but not in the same way. And when I was a senior in college, I started a rock band, and that very much defined much of my 20s.
Wait, so the rock band was a full-time situation in your 20s or a side hustle?
So it was, when I was a senior in college, I was started it with my friend who actually also went to Columbia with me from Hunter. So a Hunter Columbia friend. He asked me to join his he wanted to start a band, he wanted me to join it. And I was interviewing second semester at the banks. I was in the final rounds with Goldman Sachs to be an analyst. And I'm telling my buddies in the band, I'm like, hey, I have this interview. I know we have plans to tour and gig and all that. And they're like, they told me, if you're going to take this job, we can't have you in the band. And I remember crying to these 4 guys. Oh my God. And I had felt this thing of oh my God, I can't be a musician anymore. It was just so part of who I was since I was 4 years old. I was like, I felt like I had to be a musician in some way. I couldn't let it go. So it wasn't full time, but I had to have a flexible career that would allow me to be on the road, take time, gig, see the country. So that's what I did for 6 years or so. 5 years, yeah.
Wow. Turning down Goldman Sachs for the rock band. I mean,
Well, let's see. They didn't actually offer me the job. I think by that time I was like kind of checked out, but I did get to final rounds, and then it was sort of like, don't,
That's all the music.
yeah. So in a way, yes, I chose music, and musicians are entrepreneurial for sure. You're like putting yourself out there, you're selling CDs to make gas money. Super glamorous. You're making CDs at home and printing them. And so it's, it was a lot of spreadsheets, putting our finances down, making sure we could afford the road trip, making sure we could afford food on the road. And that band was always financially self-sufficient. We never got paid, but at least the recordings and if at least paid for itself. It was a hobby that paid for itself. And after I left, they were written up in the New York Times. So, so I'm very proud of my fellow musicians. Mm-hmm.
And they're not still together, I'm assuming, the band?
Somewhat.
Wow.
They are known in Brooklyn at indie rock scene there. They've gone through many iterations, but they are known. They're called Ava Luna, AVALUNA.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you guys market yourselves during that time, like to get gigs around the country, and how did that happen for you?
Yeah, it's a lot of networking, and in life, that's what it is, right? Relationship building. And so it's finding bands that you like, going on tour with them, finding relationships with people who put the tours together, these managers. So, and showing up to shows, talking to the musicians at shows, in Brooklyn back in the day. And I'm back in the day, I mean like 2003 to 6 or whatever. There was a lot of indie rock, scenes and venues that have since been shut down aggressively. So it's different, and maybe it'll be different again because New York is going to have to go through a whole new renewal, and maybe the DIY scene will come back.
So amazing. So Siheun, take us to, when you got involved in Rally, or kind of this startup entrepreneurial path that you've been on. Connect the dots for us from the rock band essentially
yes, I need to know.
To Rally, or if there was something before Rally, like bring us to the past kind of 15 years.
Yeah, right. I know. I was thinking about like, when was the last time, when was I in Argentina? And it was like 15 years ago. I'm like, what? I'm not that old. How is that the case? I was study abroad 15 years ago, but it was a long time ago. And so when I was a senior in high school, my high school program had an opportunity to be an intern instead of taking a 5th class. And I said, yes, that's me. I don't want to take a 5th class. And so with tech people and in general, you're always looking for the easiest path. I don't know if that's like a good theme to share with people, but you're looking for the path of least resistance. And for me, it was not taking a 5th class and doing an internship instead for credit. And I got an internship with a nonprofit arts organization in Midtown that helps high school students attend arts shows and museums and Broadway shows. And so it was a marketing company. And my mentor, my direct manager there, Eleonora, and I just got along so well. And she was like, oh, I'm going to go to my MBA program. And when I go to my MBA program, I wish you could just take over my job. You would do so well. I'm like 17, right? And she's like, really loved work. I loved working with her. And so we stayed friends. And in college, I'm in college, she's getting her MBA. And I'm finishing college, and she's like, hey, I'm working in financial services. I'd love for you to join my team. And so I told her about my whole situation with the band and how I needed flexibility. And she said, that's cool. I believe in you. I think you can manage all this stuff. And so I was with her for 6 years. And so that was my relationship, my working experience, my professional experience working as a financial professional. Helping high net worth individuals and closely held businesses with their financial planning, with financial products. I could sell stock market, I was very much in it. And And I think there was part of, just, again, you just normalize everything. You're in New York, of course you're going to learn how to sell stocks and bonds and whatnot. It's like, you just go with the flow. And so I did that for a while, but it wasn't, I would say that, you do something for a while and it's like, could I do this forever? It's like, well, life is, very much, it's a possibility, but I'm not sure. And I decided to go back to school to figure this out. And I used the same sort of compass that I had when I was thinking about my undergraduate degree. I used that same approach with my graduate school degree, thinking, well, I just want to learn something that is important and interesting to me to inform me about my life's decisions, in a broader way, right? And that for me was studying religion. And I have my Master of Arts and an MA. It's kind of like your Bachelor of Arts, has nothing to do with the arts. It's more like liberal arts. And the Master of Arts in Religion is a 2-year academic program. I went to Yale Divinity School, and that was a little bit random. A lot of time, going back to the question, the interview with the investors that you have, it's like, why do you have your master's degree in religion, right? It's like, it's because it informs you about how the world works, the systems of thought, like, why are we here? How are we here? Why are, who are the systems in power? How did they get there, right? So those are the things that were very interesting to me. And I got to Yale with my partner, my life partner at the time. And as soon as we got there, we thought to ourselves, well, we have this idea, this startup idea. Maybe Yale has some resources for student entrepreneurs. So that was like the first thing that we looked up. And of course, Yale University has an ecosystem for students. And so we applied to the program, and it's a program that gives you a couple $1,000s for funding to root yourself in New Haven, just like 43North brings entrepreneurs to Buffalo. Yale was asking student entrepreneurs to stay that summer, between my 2 years, stay that summer to work on the business. So it really was through that program that we were able to think about whether or not this idea that we had about putting bus trips together had some legs. And I would say even the business idea, just to go back to it, it never started as like, what is something that we can change in the world? Let's think about a way to make a great impact. I think that's a great way to think about, some problems for sure, and it works for people. But we didn't go, about it thinking like, what is this big world problem that we'd like to solve, or underserved population or underserved need that we can address. We didn't go about it that way. It was again a matter of just fixing practical problems and wanting to get people to Washington, D.C. for a political rally. How can we help this cause that we believe in be as successful as possible? And the answer is help get as many people there as possible. Okay, how do we get them there, right? Buses. Buses have been bringing people to political rallies for as long as buses have probably been around. And so that wasn't the genius thought. The genius thought is, well, are we going to try to fundraise or put down all of our money and then be the ones to figure out how to fill up these buses, right? Is that our job then, to book the buses and fill them up? And the answer was no, because we don't know where people want to come from. And it's really expensive to book a bus. So booking a bus is thousands of dollars, and then we'd be on the hook, and then we have to go fill it up. So that wasn't going to work for us. So we decided, all right, let's create a system where we will only book the bus if we get enough people to agree to it first. Let's crowdfund it and crowdsource it. And if there's enough demand, then that merits the work of filling the bus. And therefore we mitigate the risk, the financial risk of chartering a bus on behalf of strangers. So that was the aha moment. All right, we'll just create this system, this transparent booking site where you'll see a live count. 40 people needed, 39 people needed. You see the live number going down as each person books. And with that 1 month lead time between Jon Stewart and Steve Colbert announcing this political rally to the public. We found out about it 1 month prior, and within that 1 month, we had an MVP, a minimum viable product, and we had 5,000 paying customers on our first try. So we had organized about 100 buses, and we thought, well, this worked really well for people here. Perhaps this could be applied to events of all kinds. And so we looked at events all across the country, found people were getting together, and yes, using buses, but not using technology in a way that could help improve that experience, whether it's mitigating the financial risk or just very simply tracking the bus, right? And then we're also, the rise of, or the genesis of Rally is also kind of similar to the timeline of Uber, right? Uber is becoming a thing now. And what did Uber do? Uber took away the anxiety of, like, where's my car? Like, is the taxi here yet? Do I have to look out the window? Talk to an angry dispatcher to, order my taxi, right? Like all of those friction points and these uncomfortable experiences that you have when you're trying to order a taxi the old way, right? Uber was able to bring apps and modernize that experience. And so we're able to bring those apps to the bus experience. So a rider has an app, a driver has an app, everyone is connected, they can see each other. Let's take people's anxieties away so that the experience, we can focus on the experience. And I think the most magical part about focusing on experience is that people are getting together to be with each other, right? It's not that you're a Bills fan that could watch it at home. You're making the effort to show up at New Era because you want to be around other Bills fans. So when you're on this bus, you're actually extending that game day experience, not just limiting it to that experience once you arrive at New Era's parking lot. You actually start it maybe in Syracuse or Rochester, where you get on the rally bus. Actually, a ton of people get on from Toronto, that route, and we get that party going and that experience going as soon as you meet with other fans that you don't even know, because you just bought your seat and maybe your friend's seat, and it's just two of you joining a group of other fans to get there. So instead of having a 5-hour experience or a 4-hour experience, it becomes, a 12-hour experience, which is what it should be, right? You're dedicating your day to, you've blocked out your day to support your home team. And you're making, you're living life to the fullest instead of making transportation this like anxiety part, like, it's so annoying to get there. It's like, how am I going to get there? Who's going to drive? Who's a designated driver, right? Instead of thinking about all of those difficult things, you think about that transportation time being more the fun time. So that's the short story of how we ended up in
That's amazing.
Where I am today.
And I know exactly, like when I was living in New York and I would have a really early flight, I mean, I wouldn't sleep at night because I'd be so nervous that I wasn't going to get a cab to the airport the next morning, when the streets were still dark and, pre-Uber and, oh God, there was such a point of anxiety in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
And God forbid it be raining, you know what I mean? In New York, like you're,
oh gosh,
right?
Yeah, can't count on that.
Yeah, no. So Siheun, I think it would be helpful for the viewers that will watch this to hear from you, just kind of like your elevator pitch as to what Rally is. You just talked through it, but just in a few sentences, what is?
Yeah, I've been dancing around it. I haven't really said what is Rally yet. So yeah, Rally is bus ride share. We bring together like-minded people and we bring them to common destinations like football games, concerts, festivals. We've created the apps for the riders and the drivers, as well as the bus companies, so that they're all connected in a single system and can see each other and create productive trips.
Imagine that, with a football game or a political rally being examples of events that you would transport people to.
Yep, exactly. An event could also be a wedding. It could be something small. It could be an anniversary party trip, family trip, an event. It could be a work trip, right? A work site visit. So events are one part of the bus industry. They represent, there are 3,500 bus companies in the US. we probably can name about 3, off the top of our heads, because they're all mom and pop local companies. And that's part of, I think what, makes me and my co-founder so passionate about this industry is that we're helping small businesses digitize. We're helping them get stronger, especially during these challenging times when technology is essential to survival. So that's about 60% of the work that they do is charter work. 40% of the industry's work is the scheduled services. So the bus line that brings you back and forth from Buffalo to New York or New York to DC, that's scheduled services. Whereas what Rally had innovated on was the charter side, which is the event side, where you're bringing people together and bringing a group together for pop-up travel, pop-up on-demand travel. But now we're able to do both this year, both charter and the scheduled services. And that's partially because our technology is expanding, but it's also what we always thought was going to happen next. After we help the businesses with their charter side, it's only, the next obvious thing to help them with is the line side of the business. And for buses, we're talking about the motor coaches. Sometimes people do forget what buses are, because if they haven't been on a motor coach, we're talking about a bus that's a 55 passenger motor coach. We call it a motor coach. Has a bathroom in the back. It's elevated. There is a undercarriage for your luggage, and it's suitable for long distance because of that bathroom, because of the suspension. And we're not talking about transit buses. We're not talking about city buses. Sometimes we do work with school buses and minibuses as well, but not city buses. Mm-hmm.
Important to clarify. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to jump in a few minutes here. So Siheun, I think it would be helpful if we just talk through, going back to the high school piece. What advice would you have for young kids that are trying to figure out career paths or college? I mean, anything that you would offer them in terms of advice?
Yeah, I would say that, the most important thing, the muscle to train very early on, is to seek advice, right? Really talk to people who have who will be more than happy to talk to you about their lives, what they went through. Even if they're a year or 2 years older than you, I think I gave that anecdote about an older friend telling me what kind of a major I should choose for myself. People who are even just 1 or 2 years older, and certainly the ones who are 5, 10 years older, have a lot to say and want to share with you, and can help you understand the implications of choices and the breadth of choices that exist. And so sometimes we call it your personal, board of directors, right? Think about who are those people that you want to develop as long-term relationships to go back to. And then, of course, think about how you, are not just asking, but giving back. You're creating that for the next generation as well, and asking even those people who are a few years older than you, how can I also be of service? Making sure that that is a reciprocal relationship. And that's how they are long lasting, and that's how you get even more out of the relationship.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, just keep building that network around you, right?
Mm-hmm. Be curious, ask questions.
Julie, anything from your side, or are you just inspired and gonna,
I mean, I'm ready to go start my own business right now. So, I mean, no, I love it. I love how you touched that, especially on the internships, because our kids are learning like skills like in the classroom, like on the computer and things like that. But it's also important for them just to take those skills that they're learning inside those 4 walls out into the real world. So I think it was really like inspiring how you can connect those two as well, how it started even young. I mean, 5th grade, man, you're already started. So I love it. But yeah, I mean, our kids are developing in the classroom. And I think really touching on that internship, and if there's anything else you wanted to add, just those soft skills how important they are out in the real world.
I think, the earlier work experiences that I had, just interacting with customers, writing business letters as a kid, just being out there and mimicking those people who are, I'm working with, right? Being in that work environment. Sales, if you're doing retail sales, any kind of sales experience is really, really important. And you can't underscore the writing bit, right? Just make sure that you really challenge yourself on what is good business writing, because there's an art to that as well, which is very different from just any other kind of writing that you do. So persuasive writing, persuasive selling is just one of those things that you can learn very early on, and it's probably the strongest thing that you could really always be working on, persuasion.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Siheun.